Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to another StarCraft 2 video. What I got for you today is a best of 5 series between a top of the line Terran and a Zerg. Spawning here in the bottom left hand corner of Blackpink LE and playing with the blue Terran SCVs, I'm personally a massive fan of this man right here. Of course, I am talking about Innovation. And his opponent spawning all the way in the opposite corner of the map. He's playing with the red Zerg drones. We are looking in the main base of Impact. Now, a few of you tweeted at me saying that I should really go ahead and cover this series because apparently it is a lot of fun. I'm curious to see what will go down. Of course, this is a best of 5 like I already mentioned. There is no denying that in a best of 5 it is worth throwing out some weird build orders from time to time and maybe even cheese your opponent. Here's the thing though, Impact, he's definitely not shy to cheese from time to time, but he's going up against Innovation. Innovation's nickname is quite literally the Machine. People call him the Machine just because of this man's macro. Innovation is capable of producing so much more stuff than most other players out there. Now, of course, the differences at the top of the line are going to be very minimal. I mean, are you really going to tell me that Innovation's macro is significantly better than Maru's? No, that's just simply not going to be the case. But there's no denying that sometimes when you watch an Innovation game, right, his army will go down on one side of the map and you're like, oh man, that must be GG. And you look back at his main base and there's a similarly sized army already waiting. Innovation doesn't really drop the ball when it comes to macro. And usually, it seems to be the case, right, that usually whenever a new multiplayer patch hits, like for example the one that we had back in November, Innovation kind of struggles for like a couple of months just because new build orders and whatnot will become the standard. But as soon as he picks up what it is he needs to do, he will start dominating once again. I'm curious to see though how he's going to approach this one. I mean, he plays that machine-based style. One of the reasons why people also call him the Machine is that he plays very predictably. Oftentimes he doesn't really cheese. I mean, unlike Impact, who is not scared to cheese from time to time, he doesn't really cheese at all, which makes him a very predictable player as well. I wonder if maybe Impact knows something that we don't right now, where obviously these players will go up against each other on the Korean ladder very often as well, right? I wonder if he maybe knows roughly what it is that Innovation has got in store for us. But without further ado, it looks like the first Reaper has indeed made its way across the map. Now, the Terran versus Zerg matchup has been going through a couple of changes recently. We've been seeing like once again, a switch back towards Bio. I mean, Bio never really got nerfed. It's just that Mech became a lot more popular for a little while. So a lot of Terran players started playing Mech once again. Already though, Impact immediately going into the Nematized Carapace upgrade. That is the Overlord speed upgrade. Not something we have seen a lot of Zerg players do. And he's actually now leaving the drones into this gas geyser as well. So, Metabolic Boost, Nematized Carapace, and we'll see where he's going to spend his next 100 gas. In the meantime, though, on the other side of the map, we see Innovation transitioning towards the very classic 1-1-1 style. I would not be surprised if we're going to be seeing the 1-1-1 out of Innovation every single match. So that is 1 barracks, 1 factory, and then also 1 starport. And what this allows Terran players to do is just simply go for a variety of units. And it makes it difficult for the Zerg opponent to figure out what is actually going on. Third hatchery though will eventually go up. Impact already stacking up over 100 gas right now. Little curious if maybe this is just part of his standard build right now and if he's planning to spend that gas in just a little bit. Usually we do see Zerg players, indeed, no, he is gonna do something with it, right? Look at that, 2 more gases coming up right now. Normally we see Zerg players being pretty scarce when it comes to their gas income. They really want to optimize the amount of workers that they're getting away with in the earlier part of the game. And obviously having more mineral income will help with that. Now, Roach Warren is coming up as well, but here are the Hellions. Only a handful of Zerglings available right now. There are a few Queens as well. Solid micros so far, though, by Impact, getting a solid surround and actually now forcing these Hellions into the corner of the natural. 6 drones end up going down, but at the same time, on the other side of the map, the Overlord is now scouting. A couple of Lings managed to sneak into the natural as well, and I think that Impact knows exactly what it is he's going up against by scouting that single armory. He knows that there's a good chance, for example, for his opponent to go for that Hellbat aggression. Now, was that push worth it? Let's have a look. A couple of drones ended up going down there. It's nothing too critical just yet, but you do have to keep in mind, right? Impact seemed to be going for a bit of a push. He's even making a lot of roaches right now. He's not really recuperating those losses that we saw earlier, right? He's definitely going for a bit of an aggressive move, so every single drone most definitely counts. Now the Roach right now trying to get into position here in the main base as well. Hellions trying to go after that mineral line immediately. Now a lot of roaches are moving across the map. It looks like Zerglings will be sent back to try and help clean up this Hellion run by as well. 2 workers end up going down, but the Ravagers are already being morphed in. And I think indeed that right now Innovation knows what it is he's going up against. I mean, he sees no drones here at the 3rd base. He must recognize that something is not quite right, and immediately we do now indeed see that Banshee coming up here for the Terran player. I think that's a very smart move. There's now a bunker going up near the front as well. 3rd command center is part of that wall, so that is potentially vulnerable right now, but here are the roaches. Innovation, he is going to be in a little bit of trouble. He will need to pull those SCVs. Seems like he's a little late with those indeed. That does mean that the front door is wide open. A lot of Zerglings are now also reinforcing this army. Banshee is now out, and it's going to start hitting away at as many of those roaches and Ravagers as possible. The bunker eventually finishes, but there's really nothing available right now for the Terran player to put in there. Still though, there are so many of those Cyclones remaining. They are dealing a lot of damage as well, but at the same time, the Zergling flood has now arrived on the other side of the map, and 20 SCVs have already gone down. And while it does look like eventually, right, the Terran player here will be able to clean this up, that's mostly due to the fact that Impact decided to go back to droning here for a little while already. Nice little build here by our Zerg player. This is one of those pushes where a Zerg doesn't necessarily go all in. It's one of those pushes that I personally really quite admire, just because it's difficult for a Zerg player to go for a push and then not go all in. I'm sure you know what I mean with that, because you kind of have to make that commitment to stop making drones at some point. And it feels kind of silly to go back to workers after a little while. But Impact, being the smart man there, he recognized that that Banshee in particular is going to eventually clean everything up. There's even 2 Banshees right now. They're going to be able to clean up whatever I throw out on the map. Instead, I'm going to try and do critical amounts of damage, and I think that 20 workers indeed is a very solid amount, and then go back to workers in the meantime on the other side. Now, the 2 Banshees, I mean, they are going to be more than enough to clean up one of those queens in just a matter of seconds. A couple of spores are now being built here as well. The 1 queen in the main, though, and a bit of a weird angle, and it looks like that Innovation will be able to keep these units alive, and he's picking up a lot of worker kills. Eventually, though, one of the Banshees does end up dying. At the same time, it looks like a few of the Roaches and Ravagers decided to move across the map, but Impact being slightly indecisive there, he decides to move them back towards the main and natural of his own home base. Innovation in the meantime, though, not all too fazed by it. I mean, he did end up losing a lot of workers there, but he's already back up to 44 SCVs. 3rd command center is now landed. Finally, double evolution chambers are coming up here for our Zerg player, but there's no denying that Innovation right now has got that upgrade advantage already. 2 Thors are now being produced as well. I think we're going to be seeing that very Gumiho-esque follow-up here with double medevacs. I'm personally a big fan of that because she can really deal a lot of damage. Drones now forced to be evacuated here as well with a double Cyclone drop coming up here. But I really quite like this kind of setup, right? So Innovation are transitioning towards the double armory style here as well. No additional medevacs being produced though, so maybe he's just simply going to sit on the medevacs that he has. Instead, no, he does start them up right now. Instead, he does go for a couple of additional factories here too. So a full-on max switch from our Terran player. Of course, we could already sort of know that just by simply seeing the amount of upgrades that he was getting for those units already as well. That does mean, though, that this aggression that Impact was going for in the earlier stages of the game will be more or less shut down. Right? I mean, at this point, it's very difficult for a Zerg player to continue onwards with this kind of aggression, mostly because of siege tanks. Siege tanks, I mean, he's going to be able to set those up in a very nice position. These medevacs are going to micro the Thors back and forth, and Roaches and Ravagers just don't really cut it. 4th base is now coming up here for our Zerg player. I would love to see a Hive coming up. I think the Hive actually needs to be built here very, very shortly. We're going to need to see some tier 3 tech in order to deal with that maxed out army from the Terran player. But I love this. Look at that. Using the medevacs like dropships from StarCraft 1. 2 medevacs with Thors are now headed towards the main base, whereas a single medevac here with 2 Cyclones is going to start nibbling away here at the 4th instead. And this is quite difficult to deal with, right? Because they deal so much damage to all of these buildings. Nicely done, though, by Impact so far. Dealing with this very, very nicely. Still, Innovation is going to try and be as annoying as possible. And, of course, he's macroing like a champ while this is all going on. And this is the downside, right? His Hive is coming up right now, but there's not really a whole lot of anti-air. There are, I think, maybe a couple of Hydralisk out. No, there's actually 0 right at this point in time. He's producing finally some of those right now. But at this point, right, these Medivacs are going to continuously be able to dash back and forth whenever they would like to. Really, only the Queens are capable of shutting this down. And what this does do, right, for our Terran player is maybe not deal critical amounts of damage to the Zerg opponent, but it gives him so much time. Innovation now even having the confidence of putting that command center right there on top of the position. Hive is now just about to finish up for Impact, though. He doesn't have any Spire just yet, so I'm assuming this is mostly going to be for those Vipers, but I really do like that decision. He still does have a solid economy here as well, but in the meantime, though, on the other side of the map, Innovation is building up that very menacing mech-based force. Nice little positioning even right there on the floating barracks. This seems like a silly move to make, but I can guarantee you this is 100% calculated. Innovation doesn't make these kind of moves just for fun, right? This is not really what he does. Now, Impact does scout out, hey, there's a full-on wall there as well, but he also notices that the majority of that Terran army is no longer sitting at home. It looks like Innovation is starting his ascent towards the other side of the map. Now, keep in mind, this can go south really easily, in particular with those corrosive biles. Nice split right there, though, by Impact, making sure that his Roaches, Ravages, and Hydras do not get hit by that very big Terran ball. But this is the specialty of Innovation right now. He's got to play that late-game Terran style, that massive mech-based army that moves so very slowly. Now, I say slowly, but he's really pushing very deep onto the creep, even dropping a couple of Hellbats right on top of all of those Hydralisk, and that means that all of a sudden, those siege tanks are in a very scary position. In the meantime, though, a couple of Roaches made their way across the map. They will be forced to be dealt with here as well by Innovation if he doesn't want to lose the base, although it may just be that Innovation is smelling blood at this point, right? It looks like the third command center here of the Terran player will end up going down, but is there enough? Beautiful Blinding Cloud, though. It's going to shut down a very significant amount of those siege tanks almost immediately. But Innovation has a massive amounts of units. I mean, it's pretty cheeky, right? He pushed really far onto the creep, but he got into this position where Zerg can no longer really group his units up together very easily, and it makes that engagement so very tricky to do. And even though Impact made a nice effort across the map, Innovation takes a very solid game here, and he will be up 1-0 in this series. Honestly, though, that previous game does show how impressive of a player Innovation is, right? I mean, you gotta keep in mind, he ended up losing 20 SCVs there very early on. Now, of course, he ended up killing some drones there too, but there's no denying that usually if a Terran player loses 20 workers in the earlier stages of the game, that is almost game ending. Right? That can easily be game ending, but somehow, some way, he managed to claw his way back into it, just continuously producing more and more SCVs. And I guess that Impact wasn't really capable of droning up as greedily as he really wanted to after the aggression sort of settled down. And of course, you have to keep in mind, he lost like 10 workers prior to that engagement as well. It's all a little bit hard to call, but there's no denying that Innovation managed to pick up game number 1. Now, game 2 is indeed on Abiogenesis, a bit of an interesting map, and apparently Impact realizes that as well. He's immediately going for that very quick extractor into the spawning pool rather than the hatchery first. So the thing about this map, right, if you look at this little ramp right here on this side of the map, if I drag my screen just a little bit, all of a sudden, we have arrived in the natural of the opponent. The thing is, bases are very closely connected, and this is sort of like the 2018 edition of Steps of War. I'm sure that some of you remember Steps of War. If you do, let me know down below in the comment section whether or not you liked it or you didn't like it. Let me know like or dislike down below in the comment section. I'm actually very interested to see how many of you were fans of Steps of War. I personally absolutely hated the map. Being a Zerg player by heart, at the very least back then I exclusively played Zerg. Steps of War, it was basically a map that, I mean, if you imagine this like middle section of the map not existing, right? The whole green section of this map not existing, that's basically what Steps of War was. I mean, the bases were pretty much connected to each other, and if you saw your opponent was moving out of his natural, And he was moving around with Marines that weren't stimped. You literally did not have time to make Zerglings, because Zergling eggs would not finish before your opponent arrived in your natural. It was an absolutely ridiculous map. It's one of those maps that was there in the sake of map variety. When StarCraft 2 first came out, the developers, of course, were still looking at what the game would be all about as well, right? They had big maps, very large maps, and then a lot of really small maps as well. And they were considered to be rush maps, right? I mean, I guess they had a meeting where they decided that some maps needed to be rushy and some others needed to be very macro-focused. It was a little bit all over the place. What I would call Abiogenesis, the 2018 edition of Steps of War. It's small, but it's you know, compared to 2010, right? It's a massive map. I mean, this would be considered a macro map back in 2010. It's kind of funny how that works out. Anyway, there's definitely room for macro on this map, but there's no denying that the bases are very closely connected, and that means that you can reinforce armies very easily. So usually the games on this map are not quite as long. And even though we saw Impact going for that very quick Zergling speed upgrade, it seems to be, oh my god, look at that. The Queen trying to go for the hug, but apparently the Reaper didn't want it. But there's no denying right now that Impact has that very quick Zergling speed, but he's following it up more or less with macro. I think he's probably a little worried that Innovation might be going for some cheese. Being 1-0 ahead, of course, in a series does allow him to go for example, some double proxy barracks play. I mean, we've seen Maru do that very recently with a bunch of barracks out, for example, over here, and it's very difficult to scout all of those locations if you're a Zerg. Maru actually ended up doing in the final match of the WESG Grand Finals. For $200,000, the Madman put a bunch of barracks out on the map and cheesed his opponent. For $200,000. It was 3-3, tied up. Both of the players decided that they wanted to go ahead and play Abiogenesis as the very last map, and it's not all too surprising. A lot of players will veto this map even, where they don't want to play it in a series at all. And Maru showed us that he indeed had balls of steel playing a best-of-1 series for $200,000 by going for a proxy barracks cheese. I guess it worked out for him though in the end. Anyways, Innovation once again showing us that he wants to go for a bit of a mech-focused opener. Once again, going for that very quick armory. Was that one scouted by Impact? No, he did not quite see that one. So that does mean that Innovation is likely gonna go for a bunch of Hellbats, and now he's also gonna follow it up with Cloaked Banshee. But already though, we do indeed see our Zerg player now making a bunch of roaches. He should be able to deal with whatever it is that his Terran opponent is going to throw at him relatively easily now, with that lair finishing up very early on here as well. Here are the Hellions though, quite a few of them already. Innovation is trying to see if he can micro against these Zerglings. So far he has managed to roast quite a few of those with relative ease. Still there are, I think, about 8 or so roaches out right now. That does mean that they have to be in a good position though. One of the queens immediately does get killed as well. Innovation though, recognizing apparently that is not a fight he wants to take, and he decides to leave with a minimal losses and the majority of those Hellions intact. Third Command Sentinel also coming up here for Innovation. He's following it up with double gas. Wouldn't be surprised to maybe see maybe even a second armory, but likely more and more factories going down here in a little bit. Judging by the fact though that he's got himself +1 ground weapon upgrades right there for his vehicles, he is going to be able to transition towards mech here quite comfortably as well. Impact. He's been trying to drone up, and this is one of those tricky maps, right? How exactly do you drone up if you're a Zerg here? Because the distances are just simply so very short. Well, I guess you have to make a bunch of units and try to be safe. Innovation now even adding on a couple of Cyclones. I quite like this. This is something we don't usually see from Terran players. They transition towards more factories with tech labs and then follow it up, you know, with a lot of siege tanks and Thors and whatnot. But instead, having a couple of Cyclones really does help against a lot of these roaches in particular, and I think this may very well be the reason why Impact is currently making this many roaches as well. He's adding on 7 more just because he's a little bit worried. Here we go though, additional factories finally being added on here for Innovation. We see now another Evo chamber here for Impact. He's going to be able to start up those +1/+1 upgrades. Very helpful, of course, against mech in particular when you're fighting siege tanks and whatnot. Now here come the Banshees once again. Let's see if Innovation is paying attention, because immediately the Queens are there. Solid snipe there by Impact, and while he does lose an Overlord on the other side of the map, he is now already making himself up to transition towards the Hive. Now, of course, he did just scout the timing of those additional factories. He's like, wait a second, you don't really have a whole lot of siege tanks whatsoever. What if I just simply snipe all of your Cyclones and then fight your Hellions straight up? Beautiful move here by Impact. He does need to be careful though. Great microing back and forth here as well. Really softening a lot of these Hellbats up as well. They will go down right now. Banshee made its way back to its home base as well, but there's no denying, right, that at this point the siege tanks are still just about to finish. This is what happens when you make a bunch of Cyclones. They're very gas heavy. You do not get your siege tanks out nearly as quickly. Beautiful read there by Impact. He's going to be able to pick up quite a lot of those workers almost immediately. 12 SCVs end up going down there. The Cyclones will now also be picked off, and Impact, he's likely going to try and run a couple of these Roaches home, but they have already dealt the damage. Impact in a dominating lead right now. He's got his Hive ready to go. He's immediately getting the Grooved Spines upgrade for his Hydralisk this time as well, which I really like. So more Roaches and Hydralisk is going to be the name of the game, and I think we'll likely be seeing that Viper follow-up as well. Very nicely done though. Impact going in there, right? Very confidently. Gotta keep in mind there, he scouted with an Overseer just about a minute prior to that, and he went into the main base. He saw there were Cyclones. He realized, hey, wait a second, the factory is still, the additional factories that is, weren't quite done just yet. I'm just gonna push with a bunch of Roaches and see what I can do. And in the meantime, he was building a lot of those workers up as well. I really like it. Solidly done there by Impact, showing us what he is capable of. That all of a sudden puts Innovation in a bit of an awkward position. I mean, he's gonna go for more and more mech. There's no denying that. I mean, he's even now got double armory here. So usually double armory indicates that a Terran player wants to sit back and be like, hey, you come to me. I'm not gonna fight on your side of the map until I am maxed out. Once again, though, still getting a lot of value here out of a small amount of units. A couple of workers here and there definitely does add up over time, right? And while this Banshee will be picked off here eventually, it's more than enough right now, and it's paid for more than it was worth. 3 of those Vipers, though, are coming up right now. Hive is also confirmed here by the Terran player. That means, you know, right now that Innovation knows that there's a Hive, I don't think he really wants to go for any kind of pushes. As a matter of fact, he's now even sending out some Medivacs with Hellbats loaded up into them to try and slow down this Zerg opponent. I think that Impact is likely going to be making himself up for a massive push here in just a little bit, because there's no denying that at this point, Impact has got a very solid army. He started up +2 just now. No +2 carapace. There we go. Immediately does say that as soon as I mention it as well. But these Vipers are scary, right? Having a couple of those Yanks available, having a couple of those units ready to go, super helpful with Blinding Clouds and whatnot. Nicely done though by Impact here as well, making sure that he scouts out what's going on. Now here come the Hellions once again. They're trying to see if they can potentially get into that main base. The Medivac though was picked off there, so that means the Hellbat drop inside of the main base did get shot down. 5 drones there in total. That was not the amount of Hellions that was worth it. And I think all of a sudden, right, Impact is gonna start making a move across the map. It makes a lot of sense. Innovation is currently sacrificing a ton of army to try and slow down this Zerg opponent. It didn't quite work, and while 11 siege tanks are out, right? They are not to be underestimated. Impact is in a very solid position. He's got all of the workers that he would need for the remainder of this game. He's currently maxed out as well. Going for the Spire switch here. The only thing that I don't really like for Impact's position is that he doesn't quite have the upgrades done yet. +2/+2 at this point is pretty late. Couple more drones though do end up dying there. Wouldn't be surprised if we see more drones simply replacing these, but he's still at 75, so he's in a good spot. Now, apparently Impact though, I'm quite surprised by this, right? I think that he's giving these drops a little bit too much credit. Rather than pushing across the map, he's forced to leave a lot of army back at home just because Innovation is being such a nuisance with these units as well. Once again, look at that. Oh, they almost just roasted a couple more drones there, but still, right? There's a lot of workers that went down in total, 26 for our Zerg players so far. And Innovation, in the meantime, of course, he's the macro machine. He has not been dropping a beat, right? Look at his mineral and gas income, by the way. Right? Look at how well he's spending that. It's kind of crazy. He's got so many units out here already. He knows about the positioning here of that Zerg army, but is there enough Terran right now to hold on? Beautiful siege tank usage though. Blinding Cloud will shut them down here temporarily, yanking a bunch of those tanks backwards right now as well, and Roaches and Hydras are now moving into the natural location. That is not where you want that Zerg army to have. If there's one place you don't want the Zerg army, it's right on top of all of your production. It does look like indeed Impact is going to try and head towards the main base as well. Hydras and Roaches are once again reinforcing this army as well. Great push here by our Zerg player in red, and this is really where the lifeline, right, of the Terran player is located. Sure, these siege tanks are going to try and close the distance once again, but indeed, Impact will be the one who obtains the victory in game number 2 Alrighty, so that brings us to game number 3, and this time around, we are on acid plants. Now remember when I said that innovation is sometimes a little bit predictable? This time around, he apparently decides to mix it up. You don't send out a scouting SCV this early on, okay? Especially not a second one. I mean, sending out 2 workers right from the beginning of the game usually is not the smartest choice if you care about the amount of income that you're getting. And while innovation definitely wants to try and optimize his resources, it does look like he's got a little bit of cheese plant here for acid plant LE. First SCV now arrived on the other side of the map. We do indeed now see that barracks immediately coming up here as well, but I have to keep an eye out on the gas timings. If not, it's likely gonna be a marine based push here for our Terran player. Impact going for that hatchery first once again, like he did in game number 1 as well. Second barracks now already coming up as well, but I have to keep an eye out how committed innovation is gonna be. Impact is kind of flying this Overlord in the correct direction, but I don't know if he's gonna be able to see behind the little fog of war there, right? Like, he's gonna be able to see this properly. I mean, I can imagine, considering these players face off against each other regularly, that he knows he should check there, and he does now know perfectly well what it is he's going up against. Spawning pool is coming up immediately. We see the extractor now already being produced, but the spawning pool is one of those buildings, right, that takes a very long amount of time. Impact so far has decided that he's not gonna go ahead and cancel the natural. He does now know, though, about the fact that there's going to be the option for a bunker, and immediately drones are pulled. This is critical. Innovation has only got 2 barracks, so this is not quite a 100% all-in, but he's definitely planning to deal damage. Rather than going after the SCV, though, apparently Innovation is just simply going to be having a lot of damage dealt here to the bunker. More and more drones are pulled off the line. Spawning pool just about to finish up as well. Solid micros so far, though, by our Terran player, but what he's trying to do is create a bit of a pathway, right? So the barracks, Marines have somewhere to back up into. Couple of spines now going up here near the front as well. More and more drones are pulled off the line too. No queens on that production tab, so that means that Impact is gonna be stuck here with just a bunch of drones. Now, actually, oh my god, that's a massive deal. One of the overlords ends up dying. Now, Impact, luckily for him, already prepared another overlord here in advance. I assumed he would be hitting a supply block here. Turns out that's not the case, but he does lose a lot of vision. Impact will be finishing up 2 spine crawlers here in just a little bit as well. It does look like maybe he's going to be able to get the surround on those Marines, although the Marines apparently are all greased up before they left that barracks. And while the bunker is now forced to be cancelled, and it does look like Impact managed to hold on, there is no denying that his economic situation right now is an absolute disaster. He's going to have to take out several credit cards in order to come back into this one, because Impact, he's only got 13 workers, whereas Innovation, he is looking solid. He's even got some mules, right? I mean, look, he's even being too cool to finish the mining on that single mineral patch, because he knows he's gonna waste the resources in the main base. He's still making more and more Marines, up to the point where he's likely gonna be able to power through these spine crawlers. What do you do right now if you're Impact, right? You kind of know that there's a lot of room here for your opponent to make Marines. You don't know if your opponent is gonna commit to more Marines, right? He's just sort of posturing outside, and Impact apparently realizes that this is gonna be a difficult game to win. I mean, that felt like a bit of an early GG though, right? It felt like it was just a little bit too early, but apparently, since he's playing a series, he's rather just GGing out right now and going to the next game rather than being mentally defeated before the next game even starts. Okay, so that brings us right here very quickly to Backwater LE Innovation. Innovation, are you kidding me? No way. It does look, I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it, right? It does look like Innovation is gonna do the exact same build twice in a row. Very much so against his image, right? This is not usually what he does, but then again, I mean, when you think about it, Impact scouted it pretty much as early as he could have in that previous game. He had all of the knowledge that he needed, and obviously he did open up hatch gas pools, so he did open up a little bit greedy there. There is no denying that, on paper, Impact should have been the one that came out ahead there, right? Innovation even had one of his bunkers killed as well. He wasn't in a great position, but he still managed to squeeze out the victory very, very cleanly. So maybe Innovation has recognized that there's like a weakness in his opponent's play. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to test the waters once again and do another one of those barracks rushes. So once again, double barracks here are already going up at this point in the game. Now Impact, once more, sending out the Overlord in all of the correct directions, right? He's scouting for these kind of moments. But the thing is he going to respond differently this time around? Once again, hedge gas pool for our Zerg player. Very, very standard. On paper, you should be able to deal with this. But there we go. He should be able to see the little, you know, circles, I suppose, in the water. And right at this point, Impact knows what's up. Now, Innovation could not see that Overlord, so he doesn't know that he has been scouted at this point. He's likely looking where that second Overlord could have gone. Innovation right now putting that bunker perfectly in vision here of that Overlord. Couple of drones immediately pulled off the line, significantly less than the previous time, actually. This time, actually, it turns out that Innovation is going to be taking some damage on the SCVs rather than on the bunker. Bit of a change of pace here by our Zerg player. Now, is he going to allow this first bunker to finish? It does look like that may very well be the case so far, but he has done a significant amount of damage, and he even gets a kill on one of those SCVs. That's a big deal. Now you can use the weakened drones even here as well for some spine crawlers if he wants to, but no. Apparently Impact this time is gonna respond with double queens and a bunch of Zerglings. He's now also not mining any additional gas here. He did get 100, so he could start up Metabolic Boost if he really wants to. Question is Impact gonna hit before the bunker finishes, right? Queens are gonna come out in a little bit. I think he needs to. Right, he's at the very least dancing back and forth. He's wearing his tutu. He's wearing his dancing shoes. He's tapping away right now, but here we go. Great surround here on all of those all of those Marines. Now, somehow, some way, they did manage to slick by, apparently. That does mean that the Queen is now the one that is tasked with killing this one SCV. Great target firing right there by Impact. He will force the cancel on that bunker, and I think the rush has been denied. Metabolic Boost now also started up. Impact doing this significantly cleaner than we saw him do in the previous game. Innovation, though, confident as ever, decides to put up that command center down on the low ground rather than just simply putting it in there and losing mining time. That's inefficient. You can't really go ahead and do that, obviously, but that does mean, though, that it's currently vulnerable once Zerging speed finishes up. And I think that Impact, judging by that production tab, right, plans on closing out this game fast. You gotta keep in mind, Innovation does not really have a lot of production at home. There's really only a bunker there. Now, or rather, a supply depot wall. Now, I would like to maybe see even a bailing nest. Not a bad choice whatsoever, but here we go. Zerging speed just seconds from finishing. Apparently, it's already enough right now, though, whereas Innovation is gonna be able to keep some of those Marines alive in the bunker. He has recognized that there are far too many links out on the map, and Impact closes out this game and evens up the score. Alrighty, so that brings us to the final map of this series. Apparently, it's gonna take place on Catalyst LE. It looks like Innovation this time is not mad enough to double Rex rush a third time in a row. I'm kind of curious whether or not Innovation or whether or not Impact rather is gonna be faced by this whatsoever. I'm curious to see if Impact is gonna change up his build order, right? I mean, if you're Impact right now, do you really think that Innovation is mad enough to double Rex rush you a third time in a row? I mean, it worked out once, didn't work out in the Terran's favor the second time around. But do you think that Impact is making the assumption that this is gonna be an option once again? And it does look like, oh, I love it. Impact indeed is gonna try and play super safe here. He's even now sending the Overlords in a bit of a different way as well, just to make sure that he knows what's going on. Look at that. Really scouting very heavily here with the very first Overlord, just to make sure he does not get caught off guard a third time as well. Now, apparently, though, Innovation playing it a little bit more standardly this time around, going for a very quick refinery. Now, following it up with a barracks here as well, but obviously Impact, right? If he is getting cheesed, he's scouting very heavily right now because he needs to know before he throws up this hatchery on the low ground. But of course, we already know that it's not going to be the case. Now, I'm curious to see what both of these players have got in store for us. I mean, the previous two games were almost a little bit as if Innovation was letting his little brother play, right? He didn't really want to play the macro game that he's so very well known for, and instead he's just simply going to play a little bit more cheeky. Impact, though, likely going to follow this up with a very quick metabolic boost. Is he going to pull the drones out of gas? Once again, it does look like he's going to leave those drones in there for a little bit of time. So metabolic boost will be started up here. It does look like, once again, we may very well be seeing a bit of a Roach-based push. Yeah, I think it is. There we go. Roach Warren coming up here for Impact. Single queen only. Now, it is critical that this does not get scouted. Here we go. Very first Reaper is moving across the map. The thing is, though, the first 2 links were produced very quick, and Impact is now sending those across the map to try and snipe the SCV that's building the command center. This is really smart play by Impact in particular, because Impact is known to be the, the player who likes to go for a pool early on before the hatchery. Innovation is now forced to leave that Reaper at home and thus does not have a lot of scouting information. This is a bit of a gamble by Impact, though, right? I mean, there's about a 50-50 chance that the Reaper would move across the map. And while it was indeed not the case in this particular game, there are many chances where that is going to be the case. Impact, though, apparently has already sort of sold this story to Innovation. Innovation is following this up with a very quick bunker. Usually we see the starport right around right now, or additional barracks or anything along those lines. Impact is apparently now selling the story that something is not quite right to Innovation, as he immediately does put up a bunker. He's now met with a queen. He does notice the lack of a creep tumor there. Couple more links made their way across the map. A single cyclone will be finishing up here in just a little bit too. But already roaches are now moving across the map, and more of these units are currently reinforcing. Now the Reaper, smartly put in the fog of war there. That's in the little bush, right? He's gonna be able to see these units before Impact knows that he has been spotted. So here we go. Right now Innovation, well, I guess the Reaper started shooting, so it's pretty clear. But Innovation right now knows what it is that he's going up against. He salvaged the bunker, actually. There's no starport follow-up here either. I think that Innovation may have very well been looking to try and go for example, a third command center very early on, completely misreading the scenario because Ravagers are already morphed in very close to his natural. 3 games in a row out of the best of 5 that we have seen so far are indeed focused around cheese, as Impact wants to close this game out right here, right now. More and more Zerglings are now coming out still. Impact in a bit of an awkward spot right now, though. Do you really want to push up a ramp? Usually not quite what you want to do. I guess just simply denying mining time is already enough value for him. He's trying to bait out as many of these units as possible. Immediately, the Zerglings now do swoop around, though. They manage to get a solid engagement off, and all of a sudden, right, the links are wrapped around and the biles hit right on top of the cyclones. I think that Impact has done it, as Innovation decides to GG out of the game. Well, I guess he said WW. Apparently on Korean keyboards, the G key is actually the W key, and there's like a bit of a different kind of language. Whatever you've got set up on your keyboard is going to be typed out. But anyways, Innovation ends up losing this series 3-2. So really, right, if you take the first game with this one as well, this is what cheese looks like at the top of the line, okay? So this is indeed going to be a best of 5 series where we saw 5 games in total. And I would say in 4 of the games, the last 3 and then the very first one as well, we did indeed see a little bit of professional cheese. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this match. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. If you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. And other than that, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile or write a special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome, but I'll see you in the next one.